Welcome to everyone who has joined so far. We'll just give a couple of minutes before we kick off with today's session. So good afternoon to everyone so far. We're going to kick off pretty quickly this afternoon just because we do have a really quick 30-minute session. So first of all, just welcome to everyone who's jumped on. Today, we will be looking at we'll do a product update on our new OnSite Kiosk app. And before we do sort of any introductions, I suppose I'll just run through some quick housekeeping with everyone. So today's webinar is being recorded, so everyone who has registered and has jumped on today will receive a copy of the recording afterwards. And then we sort of encourage you guys, to revisit this content at any time, but also to share with any of your colleagues that may also be interested. If you need to adjust your audio, you can do this via the More or the Burger button, which is in the top menu item. And then once you click that More option, it'll drop down and you'll be able to select your audio settings. So you can adjust sort of how you're hearing and levels of volume and things like that. And then just lastly, we also invite any of your comments and questions today. So if we can just encourage everyone to use the Q&A chat box, which is at the top of the menu. If you think of any questions for the speakers at any point, just type it in there and we'll address these during the Q&A session at the end. And if there's anything that we don't actually get to today, we'll make sure we provide answers to any of your questions, when we send the recording out via email. So then before we get on, I thought I might just do a couple of introductions. First of all, I'm Maddie. I'm our Director of Marketing here at Lucidity. We've also got Alex on the call. Alex Turner, as many of you may know, is our Director of Customer Success, and he'll assist with any of our Q&A today. But presenting most of today's content is Richie, our Director of Product. So Richie develops and drives and executes all of the Lucidity product strategy, vision and roadmap. He's always exploring, emerging workplace health and safety and technology trends, and is deeply committed to ensuring that, the Lucidity platform meets the ever-evolving workplace health and safety requirements of our clients. So without further ado, I will actually hand over to Richie.
Thanks very much, Maddie, for that introduction. Look, today I'm just going to give you a brief outline of what we're going to talk about and show you. We're going to focus on our new OnSite Kiosk tablet app. So I'm going to give you an overview, first of all, of what we mean by OnSite and the different scenarios that OnSite assists organisations with. I'm also going to provide a demo of the new OnSite Kiosk tablet app that's available in both iPad and Android tablets. I'm also going to show you how you can improve your ability to be compliant by providing declaration messages where you actually ask your workforce if they've had a safety briefing and they acknowledge those messages, and that's logged so that if you're audited, you can demonstrate that your workers have done all the right things and that you're compliant. We'll also go through some of the settings for the OnSite Kiosk app and how they can make life on site easier for you. And I'll show you the web portal as well, where you can see who has tapped in, who has tapped out, and all of the different logs there. Lastly, I'll also go through setting up the app, things like how often it will sync with the server, what areas or sites you're connected to. I'll show you how that all works. And then lastly, we'll get into some question and answer at the end, just to make sure we can help you with any questions you might have. So I'm going to jump into the next slide now and just give you a brief overview of what OnSite actually is. So OnSite's been designed to provide organisations with a range of different options for how their workers, and when we say workers, employees or contractors, can sign into a site. And you might think, well, why do we need different options? You know, why have mobile? Why have kiosk and potentially NFC cards as well? And the reason is after a number of years of talking to our customers, we've heard quite a lot of stories about how workers might forget their phones, for example. And so we can't just rely on, say, them having a mobile app. Or sometimes they remember their phones, but then they don't have reliable internet connection, or they've run out of their prepay for the month, and so they can't connect. In other cases, they might have an NFC card that they tap, but they've left it at home or in the car, and so they can't access the site that way either. We also know that no two organisations really are exactly the same. And so we've found that some organisations we work with might have a remote quarry site in a really remote area. They might have a truck driver approaching that site and having to tap into an unattended site, in which case, relying on someone being there isn't going to work to help them. And then we've got other organisations which are really different. So they might have a high-rise apartment building that they're constructing, and they might have literally hundreds of workers all turning up at a specific time early in the morning, wanting to quickly, start work straight away. And so that's where we need that kiosk, tablet app to be really responsive and quick to enable them to tap in and out really, really quickly. And then lastly, we've got organisations who, may be working underground or in a really remote place where the internet connection isn't that reliable. So they might have an internet connection sometimes and not others, or it might just be quite a slow internet connection. Maybe it's on 4G, for example. So we've tried to accommodate all of these different scenarios to make sure that OnSite works for all of our customers as best possibly can. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how the new OnSite Kiosk tablet app, how it enables people to tap in and out of a site. So if you're managing your workforce and you need to make sure that they are correctly accessing site, that they're following all the right procedures, that's how this OnSite Kiosk tablet app is designed to be used. As I mentioned very briefly, you can set up a site or an area to have a message that pops up. Workers will see that when they tap their QR code, and it will say something like, have you had today's safety briefing, or have you signed on to the swims today? And then they say yes or no. And if they say no, they're not allowed onto site. And if they say yes, it records that they've agreed to that message and that they've acknowledged it. The other thing which we'll go through in detail is how we log the information about each user that taps in. So we record their tap in time, when they tap out, whether they've agreed to a message or not, and so forth. And then we'll get into some of the other things around how you can set up areas and sites through the web portal. One thing you'll notice as we go through this is we're using a range of different devices to manage workers on site. So often workers have a mobile, as I mentioned. We'll have the OnSite Kiosk App, and then in the back office, managing reporting, we've got the web portal. So you'll see me moving between these in a moment as I start the demonstration. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to the OnSite Kiosk tablet view, and I'll begin to show you the way a user taps in and out. So to begin with, I'm going to use a QR code to scan, and the Kiosk tablet app, that's what it's relying on, is the QR code. So when I hold the QR code up in front of the front-facing camera, it recognises that code. This is my specific code, so it's for me as a worker. And then, as you can see here, it's showing that declaration message. So if I say no, have I read today's safety briefing? Contact John Smith on this number If I say, no, I haven't had the briefing, it's going to say, Richie Rowe, you haven't met the requirements. Okay, so that means, I would go away and make sure that I've actually had that briefing, and then I'd come back and use the QR code again to tap in once told me wrong. There we go. So there, the declaration message has popped up again, and I tap yes this time because I've had the briefing, and now you can see I'm tapped in. So it's that simple, really, for workers. And those QR codes, I'm just holding it on a piece of paper, but they can be printed on a sticker to go on a hard hat. They can be on, someone can hold up their mobile phone with the QR code, or they can be printed from Lucidity as part of the workers' HR card, which has all their details on it, including the QR codes. So that's a very basic example. What I'm going to show you now is another worker. This person, his name is George. Now, George has got his QR code and he's come to site and he's held it up, but it says he doesn't meet the requirements. So he didn't even get to the declaration message. Now, the reason that message has come up for George, and I'll just bring it up again, is essentially because he needs some training or a certificate or some sort of accreditation for the site. It's been specified by the organisation controlling the site, and he doesn't have that, right? So he's not allowed to go onto site. So that's an example of the system, ensuring that workers do meet the site requirements before they can be recorded and tap into that site. So just to give you an understanding of what that looks like when you look at the logs and the web portal, I'm going to switch now to the web portal where we should see the details for who has tapped in and out of the site. And also we can go and have a look at George and see why he's not allowed in and potentially update his records, and we'll do that in a moment. Just before I do that, what I'm going to do is you'll see on the kiosk here that I can sync. So I'm going to manually sync. And what that does is it makes sure that any records saved locally are pushed back up to the web portal. It does it automatically every 5 minutes, but you can also do what I just did and make it happen instantaneously. So now I'm going to the web portal. And so this is the OnSite module, which I've accessed. I've signed in. And I've come into the OnSite module here. And here I can see different areas or sites that are available. So I'm going to click on Worksite, which is the one that we were looking at there. And we'll have a look and see. Now, how is this configured? It's really simple. You can add as many of these areas or sites as you want. So you can have one, or you can have 100 or more. You give it a name. You can link it to a particular project that might be running at the time. And you can set things up around the organization's business units and divisions as required. You can also set an area manager and so on. Now, what I wanted to focus on, though, here is the capabilities. So we call this a capability. Essentially, it's some sort of requirement for the area that all people visiting that site must have. And in this case, there's only one, and it's the first aid certificate. So they need to have completed that in order to be able to go onto site. Down here, I'll just briefly show you this. We saw this pop up on the screen, the declaration message. So here you can see I can edit this text and change it, to whatever I need it to be. It can't be too long. It's still got to fit on the screen, but it's basically a way of making sure that you can ask your workers, as I mentioned, have you had the safety briefing? Have you signed on to the SWIMs? And so forth, and then they can acknowledge that message. You can do this, you can enable that message or not. It doesn't have to be there. It depends on your area and site requirements. You can also do a failed entry message as well, which will be a customized message that pops up when people don't meet those site requirements. And then lastly, there's a remote entry message, which site supervisors can remotely tap people in, and so you can specify a message when they do that as well. So that's a brief overview of how we configure a particular site. Now, you'll remember I was talking about this particular capability and how George didn't have it. So we're going to go and have a look at that now and see in our competency module, which is another module in Lucidity, and it's again accessible through the menu here if you've got Lucidity, you'll be able to find it through there. So you can see George is required. He's got a need here to have this first aid record, and there's no record for him of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that record. And what that will do is once this is complete, let's assume that he's gone away and he's completed that training. What that will mean is that when the kiosk syncs with the cloud after this is saved, he should be able to have access. So what we'll do is we'll enter in, you can enter in a range of details, which I'm not going to do right now, but, the number of hours, for example, the cost, etc., can be entered into this way, whether it's internal or external, and so forth. So I'm going to save that record now. So now you'll see that if we go over to this tab, we should see for George, because we're in George's records here, should see any records that pop up for George. And now you can see, look, he's finished that first aid record. So the web portal knows that he's got that record. And now what we need to do is go back to our kiosk, because now George wants to tap in. But before he taps in, we need to make sure that we've run the sync, which I mentioned before. And as I said, what this does is it goes and checks and sees if there are any new users that should be allowed onto site, if any requirements have changed, and so forth. So this is going to pull that data down. And once that sync's complete, George should be able to tap in again. So let's have a look. So I'm going to hold up George's QR code now and let's see how that goes. So hold it up in front of the camera. Okay, and so this time he does meet the requirements. He's got the declaration message and he can continue to tap in. He's had the safety briefing and now George is tapped in. So that's an example of how seamlessly both the on the ground for workers on site, the kiosk works alongside the web portal. I'm going to jump back to the web portal again now. And what we're going to look at is a slightly different part of OnSite where we have the details for who is actually on a particular site. So again, I'm in the OnSite module here. I'm looking at who has tapped in and the various people, and I'm going to refresh the screen and we should see that George is there, and there he is. So you can see that both George and myself have tapped into site, and you can see details there of when they tapped in. So there's the entry time and also how they tapped in. So in this case, through the kiosk access point. There's also a very detailed log of all of the different people who have tapped in and out, and you can see all the different dates and times that that's occurred over the last few days for different people. What that will show you, if we look at a specific example here, is the exit time as well as the entry time. So you've got all the entry times, the amount of time they've spent in an area, and whether they've agreed to declaration messages or not. So that's a really handy feature for being able to, keep track of all of that information if you need it for reporting. That can be managed here through Excel exports if you need to get the data out of the system as well. And just very briefly, you might be thinking, well, how do I get these QR codes? So there's a number of ways. I've just jumped across into HR for George. I can right-click and create a QR code. That's just a feature within the browser, the Chrome web browser I'm using, to create a QR code. Or I can actually go out of the screen back to the list of all people. And here I have actions for where I can actually print a HR card. So I can print an HR record card, and that will actually create the card for the person, which will look very similar to this card here that you see. So that card can then be printed out and handed to any workers or employees that require it. So that's the OnSite Kiosk tablet app. You've seen how that interacts with the web. What I want to quickly do, though, is show you a little bit more about how the kiosk app can be managed, because as we talked about at the beginning, one of the important things with these kinds of devices and applications that run on sites is they need to be able to work when they're on for a long period of time. So you can put this into kiosk mode. I'm just going to do it now. I've actually put this in kiosk mode. I have to unlock it. Now, what that means is, we don't want workers being able to get out of the screen. So by having it in kiosk mode, I can't actually get out of the screen. If someone walks up and it's unattended, they can't leave this app. The other thing that's really important to know, I suppose, is with the data syncing, you might find that you have a lot of changes that are being made to a site, and you don't want it, and your internet connection maybe isn't that reliable. Maybe it's very slow, or maybe it drops in and out. So you might not want it to sync every 5 minutes, which is, as I mentioned, is the default sync time. So what you can do as the person with permission who's sort of managing this kiosk, so you'd be an administrator, not a worker in this case, I can go in, I can sign in, and the reason I need to sign in is so that only people with permission can do it. So if I was a worker, I wouldn't be able to go into this and make changes. So I'm going to attempt to sign in here, and I might have put that incorrectly. Okay, so now I'm in the settings screen, which I've signed into, and I can do 3 different things. I can sign out completely, which takes me back to the setup screen, which I won't do today, but I can also change areas. So if I've got multiple areas, which in this case I do, I can switch between them. So if I want to take this kiosk tablet app to another location and set it up there, that's all I have to do is choose one of those different sites that are in that drop-down menu, and those match with what we've just been looking at in the web portal. The other thing we can do, as I mentioned, is look at the sync frequency. So here in the settings, you can see the screen where you can select that frequency for the kiosk, basically how often it will go and bring data down from the web portal or send data back to the web portal. And you might think, well, why does it need to do that? And the reason is if we store the information locally, it's much faster. So if you've got 100 people lined up, it doesn't have to keep going and checking for each person. It will actually already have that data saved on the device, and so it'll be much faster. So here I can change that frequency. So it can be the least amount of time is 3 minutes, so I can update every 3 minutes. But if you've got an internet connection that's really not reliable or slow, and you don't want that sync to happen very often, you can set it to 60 minutes. I'm actually not going to change the frequency now, but that's how you would do that. So I've just changed that. So that sort of gives you an idea of the kiosk and how it's managed, both in terms of sync settings, changing areas or sites with the app, and how you can prevent workers from changing, getting out of the app by accident. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to switch back to the slide here, and I'm going to show you some additional things around how the Lucidity mobile app, so not the tablet app, but the mobile app, can be used as well. So if you've got a worker turning up with their own mobile device, you might choose to print out the site. In this case, it's worksite, the QR code for that site, and stick it at the point of entry, maybe laminated A4, and affixed to the entry point. And then all they have to do is hold up their camera and scan the QR code like so. I'm just going to switch to my phone, sorry, very quickly before I do that. And I'll just do that very quickly now so I can demonstrate that to you. So we're just going to use the phone on the screen here so you can see that as well. Okay, hopefully that's displaying. And I'm just going to switch out of that. So now you're seeing the phone device and the QR code on the phone with the QR scan ready to go. So what I'm going to do now is scan the QR code. Now remember, this is the one that would be affixed to the point of entry. And so this enables anyone with the Lucidity mobile app to either tap in or tap out of site. Now I was already tapped in, so it tapped me out, but here you can see I get the same declaration message when I scan using my mobile as I did on the kiosk. So it's all unified, whether you're on the mobile, whether you're on the kiosk. So if I say I've had the safety briefing, I acknowledge that, that will enable me to tap into site, as you can see there. So that's me as a worker walking up to the site and using my own mobile device with the Lucidity app. I want to show you another way you can also use this. So I don't want it to be confusing, but it's just to try and sort of demonstrate the flexibility with OnSite. So the other thing I can do is I can scan a QR code as a site supervisor. So you might have workers turning up and they don't have a phone, they've just got their card, so the card that's showing on the screen here. And if I have permission, so if I've been given the right permission by the Lucidity administrator, as a site admin, I can tap the on-site button that you can see on the screen. And you can see I've got the site selected here. So in this case, I'm selecting the work site. And you can see there are 2 people currently tapped in. So I can have a look at that, because as a site supervisor, I might be walking around thinking, look, are you tapped into site? Have you met the site requirements? So I can tap in and have a look at that. And I can see, yes, Richie Rowe has tapped in, and he does have that first aid certificate and the other 2 training records that he also has. So I can check that as well. So if I was, say, for example, required to have my construction industry induction card, then that would show there as well, as you can see. We can also see George here, and he's only got that 1 record, the apply first aid record. So it's a really handy way of being able to manage, as a site safety manager or supervisor, the workers on site using the Lucidity mobile app. You can also see that there's a little orange icon here, so I can actually tap people out as well. So for example, if there's an emergency evacuation and everyone is mustered to the assembly point, I can look around and see, yep, there's George. I've checked his QR code. I'm going to tap George out so he doesn't have to do it, and then he's tapped out of site. And when I go back out, I can see that that's now changed from 2 to 1. Now there's only 1 person currently tapped in to that site. Very last thing to show you with the mobile, if I am the site supervisor and I do want to tap someone in again, so if I tap myself out here, what I can do is I can actually scan people in as well. So I can hold that QR code up to the camera. So I'm scanning that HR card, and you can see I've now been tapped in by the site supervisor, which is just another way that OnSite helps you manage your workforce's access to site. So I think we've covered all of the various details that we were going to today for OnSite. Hopefully that's given you a good sort of overall picture of the capability of OnSite, especially the new kiosk tablet app that works for both iOS and Android tablets. Yeah, I'd like to now hand back to Maddie, and we can maybe look at and see if there's been any questions entered in the chat. Thanks, Maddie.
Helps if I'm not muted. Thanks, Richie. Really appreciate that. And we've just got a couple of minutes, but we do have a couple of questions that have come through here. One of the first questions we had from Dave, which Alex had put a response in the chat, but can the declaration message be edited to include images and/or updated messages? And yes, it can be edited per site. The messages can be, but that's text only, so you can't at the moment have that feature of having images on there. We had a question. If someone is denied entry due to a missing capability, can the kiosk message tell them which capability they're missing?
I can answer that,
yep,
or Alex. Yep. So at this stage, it will say that there's a training record missing, but it won't specifically tell them which record is missing. So they'll know that they've got a record they need to have, and they would then need to contact that person that's listed as the contact in that declaration message to figure that out. If they're using the site supervisor on-site button on the mobile that I just demonstrated, the site supervisor will be able to look at their records and work out what they need.
And then one other question we have is, can the on-site kiosk be used for visitors to sign in?
Great question. So at the moment, it's for workers and contractors only, but in the next half of the year, we're building out the visitor capability. So that's coming soon. And what that'll enable organisations to do is have people who are outside their organisation, not in Lucidity at all, turn up to a site, enter in their details, their name, company, phone number, and then they will be logged. And in the web application, you'll be able to see them as a visitor, all of those details and their entry and exit time. So that's coming soon in the second half of the year, but it's not available yet.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll just roll in one of the other questions there as well.
Thank you.
Someone's also asked about manual entry sign in rather than the QR code. It's It's something that isn't in there at the moment, but as part of the early designs that we're looking at with the upcoming visitor work, we're considering that as well. If people are typing their name in as a visitor, we'd also be looking to add that functionality that they can type themselves in as a user or as a registered person. There was Phil's asked a question about the mobile app to see a list of everyone tapped in. So that's how this on-site functionality that's up on the screen here works. Regardless of how you've signed in to the site and which site, a supervisor with the appropriate permissions will be able to see and review any records that a user has, whether they've signed in on the kiosk or whether they've signed in through their mobile app, or if they've been manually signed in by an administrator in the web portal version. Obviously, pending, I suppose, the sync of the kiosk. One of the cool things about the new kiosk app, as opposed to the mobile version that Richie demoed later, is that it has offline capability. It can continue to tap people in and out with patchy or low signal, and then update periodically when it does get reception. So obviously the list on the mobile app may be out of sync with that if the kiosk hasn't had an opportunity yet to sync back to the server. But yes, it will record a list of everybody that's signed in, regardless of the method.
Wonderful, thanks. And guys, just we've literally just hit the 12:30, so I'll just do a quick little wrap up and thank you everyone who has attended today, and thanks for everyone and their questions. What we'll do, as I mentioned earlier, this will all be it has been recorded, and we'll email this out to you very shortly, which you can then share with anyone. And then if you have any other questions and if there's anything else you'd like to know, please do get in contact with us. I'll put some details in the email, but if you have an account manager that you already speak to, then by all means, reach out to Alex and his team. But we will, if anyone does have any questions, please do come back to us, and we'll be happy to address them for you. But thanks everyone for attending today. We really appreciate it. And we hope you have a nice afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.